From where?
When I'm talking. Now I'm not. Okay, I don't know. Okay, we're live. Here we go.
You're live?
I am.
Oh, okay. Marcus, echo.
Right.
Sorry.
Sorry.
All right. Looks like I am live as well.
Okay, I gotta find the share. Here we go. Okay. Awesome. Alrighty. Okay, so you ready, Kelly?
I am.
Awesome. All right. So if you're just joining, Kelly and I are. This is Kelly of KelliPaints. That's her YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked her out, be sure and do that. And I'm John with Sharpened Artist. If you are just joining us, we're going to be talking today about skills for freehand portrait drawing. This is something that I often get students asking about and talking about is how can I draw a portrait freehand? I know how to use a ruler and that kind of thing, but how do I do this freehand? And the answer to that is probably a little bit closer. You're probably a little bit further down that road and achieving that than what you may think. So what we're going to do today is talk about some things to help increase your skills in moving towards freehanding an actual portrait drawing. And you can do this, I believe, if you're skilled if you're already able to sketch, number one. Number two, if you're able to look at a reference photo and maybe you've already got your line drawing completed, but you're able to do the shading on it, then you're a lot further along than you may think, because I think that's a second thing that is an indication to you that you can perhaps then freehand. There's just certain little things that if you're shown and if you know what they are, then you'll know how to start doing that. The other thing is being able to look at your reference photo and look at your actual drawing. You can, most of the time, if you're able to do that and see what the differences are, and then you're able to make those corrections, then you're probably, again, closer to being able to freehand draw with freehand a portrait than what you may think initially. So we're going to talk about some things that will help you to understand this a little bit more, and some things that you can actually do to increase your ability to freehand portrait sketching or freehand drawing of portraits.
Right. I have Michael saying hi to us in the chat.
Awesome.
So, hi, Michael. How are you? And the first talking point we're going to talk about is warm-up exercises. And this is something that I have to do before I do anything big like a portrait or anything like that. I need to warm up my hands. So what I spend my time doing is doing gesture drawings, 5 minutes on each pose for about 30 minutes just to warm up my hands so I feel more confident when I am going in to actually start something like a thumbnail or an animal portrait or a person portrait or anything like that. Do you warm up, John?
Probably not as much as I should. But gesture drawings are good because, yeah, that does get you kind of in the flow of things. And it gets you in that state where you're not thinking about, the fact that you have to do this correctly. Because one of the things that you want to do when you're sketching, and this is the way to warm up and to get into this practice and to increase your ability to freehand sketch, is sketch often. Sketch a lot and sketch often, and do it without a lot of judgment. Just go in there and do it, and don't think, oh, this has to be perfect. And the only modification to that is just make lighter lines. Don't make real bold, confident lines at the beginning. Make those lines a little more timid and a little lighter. And then as you go in and you start correcting and you start seeing where there's proportional issues, then you're going to restate those lines. You'll make them a little bit darker, a little more bold, and then that will indicate to you, to your mind, that is a line that I'm confident with. That's one thing I try to do. If I'm remembering to do that, then things work out pretty well. But yeah, sometimes I just go in there talking about warming up, and I'll just do like hatch lines, or linear strokes, and just try to see what my hand-eye coordination is right now, and if I'm having trouble with that, then I'll just maybe keep going. Maybe I'll start doing like some circles, or doing something on one side and then the same thing on the other, making sure that I can create some symmetry in whatever marks I want to create. And that kind of helps me to warm up a little bit. Do you do anything like that, or is it more controlled the whole time?
Yeah, sometimes for some reason the hands and the brain just don't work together. So
I
if
hear
my
you.
hand-eye coordination is completely off, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna step away from this for a minute
Right.
and either take a class or get some coffee or do something to actually calm. Because when my hand and eye coordination is just off like that, I'm a little too anxious and I need to do something to relax before I start again.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right, so next, so we're talking about warming up pretty much. And I did talk about sketching, but how do you sketch for accuracy? If sketching is something that you're already doing, or if you've decided, okay, I will sketch, how do you do that for accuracy? One of the critical things, I think, is starting with areas that you know. If I'm doing an urban sketch, I'm out maybe going to sketch a building in particular. I'm not going to start with something that is overwhelming and difficult. I'm certainly not going to look at all the details. I'm going to try to boil that down to a basic shape, maybe a square or a box, a rectangle, that kind of thing. And I'm going to start then in an area where I can recognize clearly what I can draw in that area. In other words, I'm not going to start up in the top, right corner if that's not connected to anything but the sky. I'm going to start down here in an area that I know, and maybe it's next to a stop sign or a traffic light or something like that. And so I have some type of proportional thing to deal with. I can judge distances based on something else. I have a spatial awareness in my drawing because of certain other elements, some kind of roadmap then that I can use as a baseline to decide whether something is going to look accurate, whether it's too big or too small or any of those things. Another thing about that then is that as I'm sketching and I'm looking at things and I'm trying to measure with my eyes, I'm really using my observation skills. I want to look first at those distances, distance apart, maybe the height and the width of something, look at the X and the Y, that kind of thing, and figure out, okay, does this thing go up twice as far as this other object that I'm looking at, or is it 3/4 of the way? That kind of thing, and look at it like that. And then it's not cheating to take your pencil, hold it out in front of you, and measure those distances and see, what the actual proportional differences are in two objects. That's an easy way to get started. And over time, you will increase your ability then to be able to see those distances without even measuring. But, it's a process. It's just something that if you dedicate yourself to, you will get better at it.
Right. Michael is saying here, start with simple shapes. It makes it easier, and practice. And I have to agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. Start with what you know and gravitate towards things you don't know. Start with simple, gravitate towards the complex. That's absolutely right. Good points there, Michael.
And it's funny that you brought that up, like the building thing, and some of the things that I like to do, especially depending on what you're drawing. If you're drawing a portrait, it's different, but if you are drawing like a building scene, like you were saying, something I like to do is find my horizon line first.
Oh yeah,
and
good point.
and work out which perspective. I feel like you need to get the perspective of your piece right before you go in with the details. Mm-hmm. And it's really easy to get lost in the details before you actually figure out the perspective of your piece and which way the light is coming in, and it's all very complicated and complex. And simple shapes, finding the horizon line and getting the perspective right comes definitely before the details, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. You're just going to overwhelm yourself if you're focusing on details and the shape and the value and all those things. You've got to isolate something, and the best thing to isolate is the large overall shapes. Look at proportion and shapes. I think that's the way to go. Certainly for me, that's the way I have to do it. Otherwise, I just overwhelm myself. And when you start moving in and out of all these different drawing aspects, then you're going to confuse and overwhelm yourself, and you'll not pay attention to something maybe with proportion or the overall size of something in relation to something else because you're focusing on details. Later on, as you develop and you increase in that skill, you can float in and out of a lot of those different areas of those elements of drawing, and you can start filling in details before you've figured out the proportion and perspective a whole lot. But it's a very difficult thing to do, and that comes with time.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. I do find that sometimes with certain things, doing the negative space
Good
first
point.
actually helps quite a bit with me too, especially with animals for some reason, because they're so like pointy in some areas and round in other areas. So it's easy for me, especially when I'm drawing animals, to find the negative spaces first and then
That
kind of
makes sense.
the big shapes in from there.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Awesome.
Another point that we wanted to bring up is that you should take breaks, especially when you're drawing from life and freehanding, because it's so easy to get frustrated with how your piece is coming out. And it always, it just definitely takes a lot longer to master the freehand part of doing anything, and that comes with hand-eye coordination as well. And just like I said, sometimes it ain't working on the same page sometimes.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. Taking breaks, that I have to do that all the time anyway, especially if I'm working on something that um, maybe isn't even as mentally taxing, but is boring. There's certain parts of a drawing sometimes, right, they're just boring, and it's like, wow, I cannot sit here one more moment, and I just have to get up because I'll start trying to rush it otherwise, and I won't pay attention to the overall that I'm trying to accomplish, and I'll rush a certain area, and then what ends up happening when you do that, you make a mistake, obviously, and then you have to start over and go back in an area and fix it after you've spent all that time, and then you can destroy it if you do something like that. So
Mm-hmm. I got another comment here from Michael, and it says 1, 2, or 3 point perspective is great if you are just making something out of your head on anything, really.
yeah,
And
that's
I do
true.
have the 3 point perspective. I took a class on that from SBS Learn, and I had to rewatch the first part like 10 times because I just couldn't understand it. I was like, what?
It's so
3 point
complicated.
perspective is very confusing.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not simple. I mean, it really is a complex idea, but yeah. And if you don't at least think about the horizon line, if you don't at least think about certain perspectives, whenever you're drawing, and at least one vanishing point, think about at least that, then you're going to have issues most of the time with your drawing.
Right. Objects to draw to prepare for portrait drawing, John?
Yeah. So okay. Though, yeah, this is something that I love to talk about, because often if somebody has never drawn a portrait before, or maybe they've drawn a portrait a time or two, but they're frustrated because they could not obtain a likeness. One of the things to know about that is that learning to draw a portrait is no different than learning to draw anything else. And one of the easiest ways to start training yourself to prepare for drawing portraits is to learn shapes, basic shapes, how to draw those basic shapes. So if I can learn how to draw a cube, a square, a rectangle, a box, a circle, a sphere, all of those things, and I'm shading them in. I'm learning how to find, where the light is, where the shadows are, and I'm looking at shape, I'm looking at value, I'm looking at line, but mostly I'm looking at those large objects then you're not that far away from learning how to draw a portrait. And it's no different than when you're drawing an animal or when you're drawing a building or a still life. You're using those same drawing skills. And so I think that's very liberating on one hand, because a lot of times, and I've seen this on the part of a lot of portrait artists, sometimes they'll make it sound like it's this just very mysterious thing. I don't know. I just sit here and draw, and somehow this happens. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't have to be this mystical thing. I mean, you can learn this. And speaking of that, I want to go ahead and put this I've got it in the description of the video down here. So if you're just joining, or if you're watching this after it's been recorded live, you can still get in this free. This is a free masterclass that Kelly and I are going to be hosting, and it's on a Monday. It's going to be airing on Monday. You do have to register for it, and there's a limited number of spots. It's going to be held on the 20th. And let me grab this link, and I'm going to go ahead and stick it in the chat here as well so that you can see
and
this.
That is on John's channel. For those that are watching on my channel, I will put a link to that in the video description when this is done going live. And hi, Bob. You are not late.
Okay. Get this in here. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to stick that in. I've got that in Kelly's chat over there for those of you that are listening over there on watching.
Thanks, John.
On Kelly's. Sure. Yeah, no problem at all. And I'll put this in mine as well. There we go. And it's also in the video description. Just remember that. And Kelly will have it, of course, on hers. And so on this live masterclass, we're going to be talking about 4 essentials for portrait drawing. And I think I can't wait to really share this information with you, because I think this is some good information, and it's free. This is entirely free. But for many of you, if you've never drawn a portrait before, I really want you to be on this free masterclass, and I think you'll get a lot out of it, because a lot of things that trip us up are proportions and alignment of the features, the relative values in the portrait, the overall composition with alignment of the subject, the artistic mood or the feel of the portrait, the color harmony and the skin and that kind of thing. Especially when we're drawing in colored pencil, we're concerned, oh, that's not going to look like skin. Maybe it looks too yellow or too orange or things like that. So we're going to cover 4 of these things and talk about them in more depth. And I think it's a lot of fun. I think it is very exciting to talk to new artists about drawing in portraits, because I wish I had started earlier drawing in portraits. So they intimidated me for a long time. But I tell you, you're not that far away if you're drawing at all, and if you understand just a few things about drawing. I really want to encourage you to start drawing portraits if it's something you want to do and you're interested in it. Don't wait. And you hear a lot of artists will say, oh, well, you're not quite ready for portraits yet. Let's start with a flower. Let's start with a watermelon or a balloon or whatever. And that's fine to do that. And if you feel like you're not ready, then go ahead and do those other things as precursors. But I think you can do both. I think you can start with portraits also and make some bad portraits. A lot of caricaturists always say you got to go through 100 or 1,000 bad drawings before you create some good ones. And there's some elements of truth in that. And so just be happy.
There's a whole bunch of elements of truth in that.
Yeah, so just be happy with creating bad ones, for a while. We all do. So, and then sometimes you create a bad one after you've created one that you really liked. So that happens too. But
Yeah,
anyway, I'm excited
agree.
about that, and I can't wait to share that information with you guys. All right, so where are we here, Kelly?
Well, you left off on objects to draw and prepare for in preparation for doing portraits, and I want to add on to that to do studies.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
break down the face, do an eyebrow, do an eye, a nose, a mouth, an ear, try to do a section of hair, um,
Absolutely.
different hair studies, just to kind of like prepare you like little puzzle pieces, and you finally understand how everything is supposed to look when it is finalized in that piece. That is what I wanted to say with that. And also, I think our next one should be our next live stream, just touching on the thing that you said a few minutes ago about waiting, that you wish you would have started portrait drawing a lot earlier. And I
Right.
think 10 things that maybe we should have, that we wish we knew back then before, but that we know now. I think that would be a really cool
That
live
would be.
stream.
That would be.
Let us know what you guys think of
Yeah, if you
that.
guys think that'd be a good
And if
one.
you want to see that, that would be really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, let us know. That would be a fun one actually, I think.
But
Might get embarrassing on my part anyway.
oh,
That would be
dude.
that would be good. Oh man. Okay.
uh, okay, yeah. So the next point is, now a lot of people, when they're transferring their sketch, they use a grid as well. And for some reason, grids mess me up. I don't like grids, and I think that they take too much work.
Yeah.
I like to print out a reference photo the same size as the paper that I'm going to be working on. And then I measure out key points, like, like the corner of the eye, like the shape of the head or whatever. And you measure them out, and then you measure them out on your paper that you're working on. And then you draw and basically connect the dots
Yep.
to get your basic shapes. And that for me is a lot easier than using the grid method. I feel like the grid method is just too much preparation for it, I think. What do you think of
Yeah,
that, John?
I would have to agree. I yeah. No offense to anyone who loves the grid method. It
Yeah,
never worked for
definitely
me.
no offense. If you like it, that's your
Yeah,
thing.
it never worked for me. I've tried it. I've tried it a number of times. Never worked for me. It just doesn't work for the way that I draw at all either. I think for people that, and I'm not sure, I don't think you draw this way either, Kelly, but no, I know you don't. But it might work best for someone who draws in these little patches. I've seen people draw in little patches, and they draw and build something up to completion, then they move on to the next and build it up to completion. It might work well for those types of artists. Doesn't for me, because I don't think like that. When I'm processing through a drawing, I think of the entire drawing the entire time, and I think of building up values the entire time and keeping a balance the entire time. And so that, I think, is in part why the grid system doesn't work very well for the technique of that I use in drawing. But another reason why I think it kind of limits you, if your goal is to get better at freehanding, then I think a grid system is not a good approach for you if you want to get better at freehanding, because it's forcing you to think in little tiny patches. And I think when an artist is drawing in little patches like that, they're thinking more about details than they are the overall object and shape of what it is they're drawing of the object. And just my opinion. If you disagree with that, that's fine. But I think I'm right about this. That if you're drawing overall objects and shapes, and you're looking at negative space, for instance, with the face, and if we're narrowing in on the eyes, maybe just the mask of the face, not eyes, nose, and mouth, and I'm looking at those things, I've got to look at the distance between the outer corner and the side of the face over here where the zygomatic is. That makes a big difference. I got to look at the distance of the eyebrows to the top of the eyelid, and same with the bottom eyelid to the bottom, base of the nose. The nose, from the in the philtrum area to the top of the lip. All those things matter. But if I don't care about those things, and I'm only looking at a little section at a time, I'm only drawing an eye, I'm only drawing a nose, that kind of thing, in isolation, and regardless of whatever is around it, then I don't think that I'm going to progress in my freehanding skills as quickly as someone who's thinking of the overall object and shape of what they're trying to portray. So there it is.
Yeah,
That's just my
I have
opinion.
to. totally agree with that because I feel like I'm not patient enough for the little grids either. And then there's that whole,
Yeah.
a lot of professionals tell you to draw from your shoulder, and you can't really draw from your shoulder if you're focusing on little box after little box after little box.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
getting the overall
True.
shape, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
especially with like Aaron Blaze, somebody like that, man, he preaches draw from your shoulder like all the time. And it's to watch him work like that live without having to use any kind of reference points or
Yeah.
grids, you know, like he's been doing it forever, drawing animals for about 20 years or so.
Right.
And, you know, it's really cool that the drawing, I've been trying to take that into consideration lately, and I think that that has helped me out quite a bit.
That's interesting. I mean, and um, uh, here's the thing about that. I mean, he's an illustrator. Drawing from your, I don't draw from my shoulder. If I'm doing something that's intuitive, then maybe I might do that a little bit more. Or I use an overhand, baton kind of hold, this kind of hold where I'm taking the pencil overhand so that I'm not focusing on little details.
Right.
I understand the point that most artists are making when they're saying draw from your arm and that kind of thing and not, not your wrist. I understand their point, but for this type of media and for fine art and not illustration, I think that there's a point where I've got to get in there and get some details once in a while, and
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
different way of. I don't have a problem with not drawing from my shoulder, and but you do have to readjust your thinking. You're thinking I'm not drawing details right now, but I understand what they're saying. And I think for gestural drawings
Yeah.
and especially
Yeah.
larger drawings,
And
absolutely
getting those basic
yeah,
shapes
you've
with the
got to get
gestures,
yeah.
and then you go into the wrist.
Yes, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And that
Mhm.
I resonate with that point. I understand that point. I think that makes a lot of sense, but
Yeah, I mean,
we'll see.
obviously, it's hard not to not draw from your wrist, but I
Right.
mean, getting those general shapes in, I'm a lot looser. Like, I think it's more of a stay loose in the beginning and get
Yes.
tighter later kind of situation that they're trying to portray, but it comes
Right.
off
Absolutely.
weird. So yeah, that's what I meant by that, I guess you could say. Uh,
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Cool. Very, very cool. So let's see here. All
You
right.
got any comments or questions over there?
No, it looks like my chat froze up, so I'm not real sure what to do about that. Um,
Okay.
let's see.
Bob said anything Kelly wants to do, I want to see. So that was in
Wow,
reply
that's
to
really
the.
nice.
Thanks, Bob. I know him in real life, so
Okay, let's hope. All right.
we're tight.
I'm just teasing. All right, that's cool. No, that's cool.
um, yeah. So, is there anything else that you think we should address today, other than warm up exercises and how to sketch for accuracy? Any other points that you think we should add?
No, I just think that when you are sketching and you're wanting to sketch for accuracy, then be concerned with measurements and measure in your mind, measure with your eyes, looking at it, judging the distance. If you want to look at how you did, then take a ruler out after you're done with your sketch session and see how close you are in reality. Take a picture of it on your phone or something like that. Look at it and actually judge how well you did if you want to, judge it later on. But the main point is do sketch. Start sketching if you're not. Keep sketching if you've started, and you will get better over time if you're concerned about freehanding and you're thinking in those directions that we talked about.
Yeah, definitely. I think so
All
too.
right, don't forget to join us on Monday for that masterclass. I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about, again, 4 essentials for portrait drawing. So, all right, this is a lot of fun. And anything else, Kelly, before we go?
No, thanks for everybody for
Awesome.
joining us.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks,
for doing
guys.
that.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.